In this universe, Dagoth Ur prevailed over the Nerevarine. This alternate reality begins on Vvardenfell, the great island of Morrowind where the dreaded Red Mountain stands. Unlike what happened in the original universe, here Dagoth Ur emerges victorious from the final struggle, creating this branch in time. The heart of Lorcan, the treasure he so prized, is now free to be used without opposition. Without the Nerevarine to destroy it, Dagoth Ur has time to cement his connection to the heart, elevating his strength far beyond what the Tribunal could. He gathers the Ash Vampires, his blood brothers, and establishes them as generals and high priests, charged with governing the fortresses surrounding Red Mountain. Vivec, already weakened by the loss of the heart, sees his authority in Vivec City waver and his faith crumble in the face of the advance of the Sixth House, known as House Dagoth. Almalexia, still in Mournhold, attempts to maintain power over the people, but encounters growing resistance and is ultimately overwhelmed by the corruption of the Blight. Sothasil, though reclusive, becomes a distant but inevitable target. Not even his isolation would be enough against Dagoth Ur's absolute rule. One by one, the three tribunes, weakened by Dagoth Ur's control of the heart, would be utterly defeated, paraded as symbols of the Sixth House's victory over the false gods. With the Tribunal in ruins, the religion that sustained Morrowind collapses. Many Dunmer resist, but amid despair and nationalist propaganda, much of the people eventually turn to the cult of the Sixth House, proclaimed as the only true salvation against the Empire and foreigners. As the Blight, a toxic ash storm, infects people and animals on the borders of Skyrim and Cyrodiil, Dagoth Ur gathers his armies and Sixth House cultists and decides to attack. His goal? To exterminate all Imperial influence in the province. The Imperial Legion, unaware of the threat, tries to resist and attacks the Ash Vampires. But soon, the true magnitude of their enemy becomes clear to the humans, a conquering god. Dagoth Ur unifies Morrowind outside the Imperial banner. Imperial governors and foreign traders abandon the province in desperate flight. The Empire, still powerful but unable to sustain a war against a living god, gradually loses control over Morrowind. Even without officially announcing it, the Emperor begins to consider Morrowind a lost province, preferring to concentrate his resources in more stable regions. To Dagoth Ur, Dwemer engineering was an affront to the sacred. He considered Kagranak's creations to be desecrations, mere devices of mortals attempting to manipulate divine forces they did not understand. For him, creating another Numidium would be a step backward, for he had already transcended the status of any construct. He was, in his own view, the true living god of Morrowind, superior to any invention of metal and gears. Dagoth Ur's triumph frees the Blight from its former borders in Red Mountain. Controlled by him, the plague now spreads at his will, consuming not only Vvardenfell, but wherever he wishes. The corpus becomes an instrument of power. Captured enemies are deliberately contaminated, transformed into deformed servants or reduced to mindless aberrations. Those who swear fealty to the Sixth House are granted selective immunity or privileges within the New Order. Dunmer clans that bow to the Lord of Awakening are rewarded, while those who resist see their warriors and families degenerate into diseased creatures. However, a wave of revolts erupts in several regions of Morrowind, fueled by promises of liberation and external support. The Sixth House suppresses the insurgents, but the price of victory reveals a grim scenario. Narcissus, in the heart of Hlalu territory, falls under the rule of the Argonians from Black Marsh. Kragenmoor is captured by the Imperial Legion, becoming a foreign stronghold. And in the Velothi Mountains, Nordic detachments set up military camps, threatening the passages to Skyrim. To Dagoth Ur, the message was unmistakable. Neighboring nations were infiltrating his land to cause instability, and poisoning the minds of the Dunmer against the only god who promised their salvation. In the eyes of Skyrim and Cyrodiil, this was a response to the threat of the Blight that had reached their borderlands. Even though the Argonians had a resistance to the poison, they faced invasions of Blight monsters from Narcissus. Dagoth Ur had no plans to establish a traditional kingdom or empire, but the recent rebellion, which had made him face his Dunmer brethren as enemies because of foreign influence, filled his heart with hatred. His response would be overwhelming. He launches a massive attack on his neighbors. Due to the difficulty of invading the swamps of Black Marsh and the countless lives lost on both sides, a truce is signed with the Argonians. Losing vast territories in Cyrodiil and Skyrim, the Empire requests aid from the other Imperial provinces, Hammerfell and High Rock. As much as resentment burned within Dagoth Ur, he had no desire to drag the Dunmer into an endless, bloody war. The toll in lives would be too great, and his goal had never been to see his own people torn apart. So he turned to diplomacy. He met with Imperial emissaries, representatives from Cyrodiil, Skyrim, and Black Marsh. He reinforced the existing truce with the Argonians and established a new treaty with the Empire, the so-called Red Ash Concordat. His interests were always centered on Morrowind. As long as other nations dared not interfere in Dunmer affairs, peace could be maintained. Dagoth Ur agreed to cede part of the occupied lands, but not all. In return, the Empire could freely maintain its faith in the Nine Divines, the veneration of the Hist, or even Daedric cults, as long as they did not seek to infiltrate Morrowind. For him, Tamriel remained decadent, with a fragile and corrupt faith. He never considered conquering the continent or founding a universal empire. His ambition lay elsewhere, to purify the Dunmer, to elevate them under his newly established divinity. With new domains and new powers granted to his people, Dagoth Ur led the Dunmer into an era of relative peace, a peace sustained by fear. The Blight, at once a curse and a redemption, became his weapon and his legacy. Meanwhile, the Aldmeri Dominion, still far from being formed in this timeline, would regard Dagoth Ur's heritage with horror, seeing in him not an elven brother, but a living abomination. In the original universe, Dagoth Ur was defeated by the Nerevarine, but here, he triumphed and reigns as the living god of Morrowind.